Since Brexit started really hurting people, you may have seen the odd nutter try to blame vocal Remainers for the damage of Brexit. And usually it's just on Twitter and Facebook, but it just happened on LBC in an interview I just did with Tom Swarbrick.
Do you believe people who expressed the view that you had during the referendum campaign and then afterwards, which was we need to rejoin, we should never leave, share some responsibility for the Brexit we ended up getting? Because I would argue that people like yourself and Alistair Campbell, and I've said this to him personally, overplayed their hand massively by saying, no, we need a second referendum, we need to rejoin, we need to remain. It further pushed people into entrenched positions, and we ended up with what was, in the end, a pretty, I don't like the terminology, but a Brexit that was further away from the European Union than the one that certainly Theresa May negotiated.
Now, because I quit my job and went on the road for 2 years, making the argument there should be a referendum after Brexit's been negotiated, severely damaging my mental and physical health because I was desperate to avoid all the damage we're seeing now, the accusation that people like me are to blame for the damage of Brexit, there's a lot of emotion in this for me. So I'm just going to switch them off for now and say these facts as robotically as I can. In the 2017 election, Labour's manifesto said that the benefits of the EU single market were essential to jobs and Labour would always put jobs first. I voted Labour in that election as a way to avoid the damage of leaving the single market, which we can currently see now, and the data shows that I was not the only Remainer to do so. Which means we tried to find a compromise of leaving the EU but without financially hurting people, and it didn't get a majority. After that election, Theresa May was in power, the Tories were in power, and so that soft Brexit option was off the table. So by the end of 2017, the least economically damaging version of Brexit was off the table, and at the start of 2018, government documents showed that any version of Brexit they tried to negotiate would economically hurt the UK. So when I entered the mainstream media scene in February 2018, any position other than we need a way out of Brexit would have meant the British people should be made poorer. And the official campaign for a second referendum didn't start until April 2018. And given that we know that Brexit is currently playing a part in the cost of living crisis, I find the idea that it would have been more moral to support additional poverty interesting. And the Brexit that Theresa May negotiated wouldn't have kept us permanently in the single market. The core principle is that Theresa May's version of Brexit was slightly further away from EU alignment than Jeremy Corbyn's, and yet even that was seen as too soft, too close to the EU. And not only did thousands of Leave voters take to the streets calling Theresa May's Brexit a betrayal, but more MPs voted against her Brexit deal than voted against anything in the history of the UK Parliament. Because here's what the Brexit politicians had to say about it at the time.
In this arrangement, we can only leave the customs union with the permission of the European Union, which is a worse situation than we're currently in.
This is just about as bad as it could possibly be. Accepting EU rules but are unable to shape them.
That it is not so much the vassal state anymore as the slave state.
I think this is the worst deal in history.
But the moment that that deal was so widely rejected by Brexit voters, it became clear to anybody with a brain that for the 52%, it wasn't just about the act of leaving the EU, but the new relationship with the EU. And there was no agreement among the 52% as to what that should be, and there still isn't to this day. Not to mention the Brexit deal that Boris Johnson negotiated was rejected by the DUP before we left, and the Brexit Party before we left, and by Boris Johnson himself now. Now, because under international law, the new treaty with the EU is literally Brexit, that means that all three parties representing the 52% who voted for Brexit don't like Brexit. By contrast, the 48%, Remainers, all voted for the relationship defined by the treaties of the European Union. So to sum up, it was mathematically impossible to please all 52%, any version of Brexit would have made people poorer, and Theresa May's Brexit suffered the worst parliamentary defeat in UK history, so an even less damaging Brexit would have had no chance, which meant that giving people a say on whether or not they prefer the new relationship with the EU to the old relationship with the EU is both a moral, logical, democratic, and economically smart thing to do. Sadly, in those 3 years, UK news channels failed to explain one simple point. If you sign a 4-word contract that says leave the European Union, and the other party to that contract adds 1,000 pages of extra terms and conditions 3 years later, and calls it the Brexit you voted for, that's not consent. And so it was left to me and hundreds of others like me who didn't have a platform in 2016 to compete with the biggest news channels in the country and the UK Parliament to try and avoid the suffering that we can all see now. So to be told by the people who failed to challenge Brexit that we're to blame for Brexit because we weren't pro-Brexit enough, again, I have emotions about this.